The term podcast was first coined in 2004 by a British journalist as a portmanteau of the words iPod and broadcast. Although many still think of podcasts as primarily audio files, the definition has been expanded to include video, text, and other media files that can be played on a computer or downloaded to personal electronic devices. It's only in the last 10 years that podcasts have been seriously and more frequently included in pedagogical studies. Prior to this, the use of podcasts in education was limited by download time, as high-speed bandwidth was relatively uncommon. But with the introduction of faster personal internet connections, we've seen an increase in popularity that further surged from the creation of RSS feeds. RSS feeds allow users to subscribe to and seamlessly receive updates to their favorite podcast productions. The use of podcasts in the educational context falls primarily into two categories. You can either access existing podcasts that relate to curricular content, or teachers and students can create podcasts themselves. Despite the proliferation of podcast recording software applications, many of which are highly affordable and some of which are open source, in the context of the classroom, it's primarily the instructors that are creating podcasts for the students. Some record their class lectures for students to review at a later date. Others supplement content presented in class to extend the ideas being explored. And still others use podcasts as a preview mechanism to free up class time for practical applications or class discussions. All three methods support the constructivist theory where learning occurs in individuals' minds as a result of their exploration and experiences. For students who are given the opportunity to create podcasts, it's most often an assigned project to demonstrate the learning of curricular content. There is growing evidence that the existing use of podcasts in education has resulted in marked benefits, such as anytime, anyplace learning, student-centered agency, simplicity and time savings, and superior support to auditory learners, who comprise 30% of all learners. Podcast use in education has been especially successful where auditory comprehension is a significant portion of the learning, as in language learning or music courses. To see greater implementation of design and production efforts, as well as to increase ownership of the learning, students must be encouraged to create their own podcasts. It's only through these efforts that true constructionist learning can occur. In current literature discussing the use of podcasts, and in particular those authors that suggest practical application of podcasts in an area of study, podcast production and design is usually simplified into a process such as this: script writing and editing, presentation, audio recording and editing, and finally, publishing and distribution. Using this process to create a one-off or even a handful of pod or vidcasts will undoubtedly have significant learner benefits. However, the use of audio files or student-produced video in such a manner is simply a modern iteration of the traditional class presentation. In order to see the most significant learner growth in using podcasts in the classroom, a teacher facilitator needs to highlight one unique element of the format: serialization. As noted, the exponential growth in podcast popularity can be attributed in part to RSS feeds. And with aggregate podcast apps such as iTunes, Stitcher, or Downcast, it's easier than ever for learner producers to reach a wide community on a regular basis. With the alluring potential of a serialized audience community, students will become even more engaged in the design cycle, where once it may have been an exercise in technical proficiency or perhaps even narrative formation, it now becomes an opportunity for students to continue to build upon their own created knowledge, to revisit, reflect, and remix the product in the subsequent podcast productions. Studies already indicate that in terms of project design and presentation quality, there's a significant difference in favor of those using podcasting as opposed to creating CDs. To revisit, review, and remix the content you created, and to have a built-in understanding that you'll continue to do so, possibly with no end in sight, embodies values of lifelong learning and allows for cohesion between media literacy, technical literacy, and design.